Welcome to the FAFSA and WAFSA line by line. This is our financial aid training for fall. To me, this is the first day of fall. It truly is. Like when I do the line by line, I feel like this morning I got up and got my coffee. It felt like a true fall day, even though the sun is out right now. And it's really false fall. And we know that there's still some more summer coming, so don't worry. I'm really excited to talk to you guys about financial aid. My name is Christina Winstead. I'm the Assistant Director for Outreach, and I work with the 12th Year Campaign at the Washington Student Achievement Council. And I'm joined by my awesome colleague that you may know from Otter.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Washington. I'm also with the Washington Student Achievement Council. I support Christina with the 12th Year Campaign, and as she mentioned, I'm also the program lead for OtterBot, which you guys may have been hearing more and more about over last year, and then hopefully this year as we go into the second year of the program.
Perfect. So welcome to our training. The cool news is last year we expanded the 12th Year Campaign, and so we have a team now with Sam, myself, and Sarah Weiss. So let's start talking about financial aid. I just got screenshots of the new financial aid application last night, so I'm very excited. So financial aid, why is this important? This is the most critical piece here. The first thing is, why is this important? It's because that students who complete a financial aid application are more likely to enroll in post-secondary education. That funding component can be a barrier for students. And so helping students understand that there are ways to pay for college, that yes, college is expensive, but there are ways to pay for it is really critical. With the 12th Year Campaign, we serve all students. So when I say all students, I mean every single student that's out there. I want to make sure that we serve. If they want to go to any sort of post-secondary education that requires funding, I want to make sure that we provide assistance to complete those applications. So when I say all students, I mean not just the students at your schools, but incarcerated youth, youth in care. I want to make sure that we're reaching out to as many students as possible. If you are working with special populations of students and you want some extra assistance, please feel free to reach out to me. I know that one of the schools I was working with, they thought that the application for an independent student was actually harder to do, and so they were waiting off till someone could show up to help the students, and it ended up being the easiest applications for me to do, and we ended up getting all of them done in a couple hours. So I want to make sure if you're working with students and they have questions and they need help, we are here to support you. So here are the big FAFSA changes. We're going to start today's training with the FAFSA and we're going to end with the WAFSA. The nice thing about the two applications is they are very much the same questions being asked, but a little bit differently. So we'll go over those differences. So here are some changes for the 2021-2022 FAFSA. The biggest changes I have found in this application are some good benefits, including the introduction of a button for the student to push if they have a sibling that's also applying for financial aid. So it tells them at the end of the application, do you have a sibling that's applying for financial aid? And it actually transfers the information from that student's application, the parent information, into the other student's application. The parent still has to sign, but that's a really cool update. And it's asked differently this time. In the past, it was asked in a way that the student may not have known to push that button. And this is we'll see it in a second, well, in a couple minutes, that it is very easy for the student to understand. They changed the language in it. The biggest changes really came to Schedule 1 forms with this application. The Schedule 1 forms were very confusing last year. I know for those of you who worked with me, it was hard to navigate the Schedule 1 and K forms. Schedule 1 is going to have more questions in the application, but they're going to be skip logic based. So if the parent or student answers a question in a certain way that determines they don't have a Schedule 1 form, it will not be asked of them throughout the rest of the application. So that's a nice update. Also, the Schedule 1 forms are going to be importable through the DRT, the data retrieval tool. And that's the tool that students and families can use to import their taxes directly from the IRS into the FAFSA. And then, of course, there will be a My Student Aid mobile app update. That seems to be pretty common every October. We want to make sure that students update their application if they've already downloaded it so they can see the 2021-2022 application that's available. So very quickly, here are some common financial aid application mistakes. You probably know of these, you've probably navigated them, but I just want to make sure everyone's aware. The most common when I'm going out and fixing applications during the school year, Most common is incorrect legal information, so not using what's listed on a social security card, or using, like, I've had students make up their social security number because they don't know what it is, and so they just make it up. Please no. So we want to make sure they're using the information legally listed on their social security card or on their documentation. No nicknames, no informal versions of their name. It's because they're matching it into a federal database. If you're working with a student whose name is legally changing this year, let's say they're putting in for a legal name change and they've started the financial aid application, as soon as their name is legally changed, then they can reach out to the financial aid office and update it if they've already started their application. If they haven't submitted an application and they've legally changed their name before the application starts, they can go ahead and use that legal name that they've changed to. The correct financial aid application year. This is the biggest one. I know you have had students, if you're working with students who have filled out the wrong application year. So let's say they do the current year's application instead of the year that they're going to college. That's the most common thing. I always tell students when this happens, it's okay. We're gonna do the next application. You're gonna learn how to do a renewal at the same time that you learned how to do an initial application. It shows them with the renewal, like how much information is imported to the next application. And I just tell them that the first one was a practice application. Using the correct tax information year, using the correct parent information for dependent students. So making sure they're using the correct parent. And then parents, especially families that have mixed status families, parents using zeros if they don't have a social security number. That's a huge one, and we'll talk more about that. And then just not finishing the financial aid process in general, not being aware that the process continues is another common error. Very quickly, here's the financial aid process. It just kind of walks you through applying for admissions, applying for financial aid. Of course, we want them to apply for admissions. They can apply for all the funding in the world, but if we have nowhere to send it, whew, it's hard to do. So we want to make sure they're applying. I encourage them at least 3 schools or reach a target in a safety. On our slides here today, you're going to see a Financial Aid Advising Day logo for 12th year campaign, as well as some resources. So whenever there's a resource on our Financial Aid Advising Day webpage for 12th year campaign, I've added them all here in a graphic on the side of the slide. So if students are wanting more information about the financial aid process and you want more resources to support them, they're right on that page. There's 3 ways to apply for the FOSFA. There is the website, or FOSFA on the web, as they called it in the past. You also have the app and the paper application. The paper application is the one that takes the longest to process. They will not be releasing the fillable PDF of the 21-22 FOSFA paper application until the 1st. I encourage students to pick the way that's the best fit for them, but for the paper application, if there's any way they can do the website or the app, I encourage them to do that. Paper applications typically are really good for incarcerated youth. If you're working with incarcerated youth and you want me to send you an awesome college access care package for your students, my goal is to make sure that every youth that is incarcerated at a correctional high school is receiving this information in a engaging and celebratory way. I want students to be excited about their next steps. And so for those applications, I encourage if you're reaching out to students, there's limitations at correctional high schools on what you can send, specifically things with staples, sometimes cardstock. Places have different rules. I bought an industrial sewing machine a couple years ago, and now I take the staples out of all of our materials and I sew the spine and create a packet for incarcerated youth. So like I said, if you are working with any incarcerated youth, this is something that I'm very passionate about. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to send you college access care packages. The website and the app are the most common ways. The website, we know that the first couple days of the financial aid application being open, that you may see the dreaded words, you have encountered an error on the FAFSA on the web, which means the application itself is not accessible or has timed out. A couple different things can happen. If you are working with students and they're struggling getting on the website, the website's crashing, I have found that the mobile app on the phone seems to still work. So then I tell students, if you can get on your phone, you might be able to continue working on your application. This is where they start to complete the application. They're just going to click on new to the financial aid process if they haven't done the FOSFA yet. And if they're returning user will be if they've already started the application. So returning users are going to be your class of 2020 seniors that might be starting this process again in October. They might be reaching out to you more this year because you've established trust with them. especially in the financial aid process, they might reach back out to you. And I encourage you to invite your seniors to virtual financial aid events. We have 6 of them this year, 7 actually. And I want to make sure that if we have our seniors that have just graduated, if they need help for their October applications, we're here to help too. This is a new piece for Fafsa Deadlines. Our state doesn't have this, but if they are going to move to another state, it just kind of lets them know what the deadlines are for each state. So we know the first step for financial aid for the FOSFA is going to be the FSA ID. This is what they use to sign their application, to log into their application. It's just a quick and easy way for them to say, I am going to college next year and I need to create an account. Takes about 15 minutes. It is not a race. I tell students, because they will rush through this so quickly, it is about accuracy. So you can make these as quick as possible, but you're probably going to have to call federal student aid to unlock your account when you realize you didn't put the right information in. So it's about doing it slowly and accurately. It takes about 15 minutes. Students are going to create their username, password. In this process, I encourage them in any financial aid process and admissions that they're using an email address that's not their high school email address, because they lose that after they graduate. And when they don't have access, they miss out on some very important messaging. FSA ID creation support and resources. Federal Student Aid has a FAQ right on their webpage, and then our 12th year campaign site also has a student support module with a video, a infographic resource, as well as a Kahoot quiz. So all of our student support modules have those. We have our FSA ID worksheet, the 12th year campaign workbook as well to help students with this process. Students will be asked to create an FSA ID, and some students' parents will be asked if they're dependent to create an FSA ID to sign the application. Parents that don't have a social security number cannot create an FSA ID, but they can sign the paper application, or the application with a paper signature, and we'll go over that shortly. So here's your login page. They're going to log in as either the student or the parent, or a preparer if they're using a preparer, which is very rare, or a student from one of the freely associated states like Marshall Islands, so they'll use the other box. For the student, they are going to enter in their FSA ID. This is a great spot if they have not created one. They can just go ahead and click on create one, and it takes them right to the FSA ID. So they'll use their username and their password. Then you're going to have just basic general information for the students who do not have an FSA ID. So this is going to be for freely associated states, and that's because sometimes these students will not have a social security card. Then it just goes over disclaimers, how information is being used. They can accept or decline, and then it's going to start them at the beginning. They're going to select the 2021-2022 FOSFA. I know that sounds super futuristic, but that is the year that they will be going to college. They're going to be using 2019 taxes. You will not see this on the application until October 1st. These are screenshots directly from Department of Ed. And so if you logged into the FOSFA right now, you would only see a 2021 and a 1920 application available. Save key is just a 4-digit number that they're going to remember by the time they're done with the application. They also need to share their save key typically with their parents, so the parent can go in and complete their portion of the application as well. The save key is the only thing they're sharing. They're not going to be sharing their FSA ID. They're going to be sharing that save key though. Want to make sure everyone's aware of the 45-day rule. The 45-day rule is that if a student does not log into their application for 45 days in a row, their data will be deleted. So we want to make sure that students are continually working on this application to make sure that they move towards completing it so they don't miss 45 days and have it deleted. Usually I see this in winter when I go visit schools and students say I started the process, but I don't see anything in there that says I need to start my application. It's because they have had their information deleted out. So even if they just log in and work on it a little bit, it won't delete it out. So they just have to keep working at it slowly but surely. This is just the introduction. It walks them through the different sections of the FOSFA and the information that they need. Here's the first page. It's going to be personal information for the student. This is going to be information that can be automatically imported from the FSA ID. So when they create the FSA ID, they're also creating some of the information that's imported. Again, for email address, I wouldn't have them use their high school email address. I would have them create an email address that is professional and won't make an admissions officer blush. That's just one of those things. I know that because I used to do admissions, and some of the emails that students use are surprising. Permanent mailing address. So this is going to be mailing address as well as city and zip code. This is going to ask for residency and eligibility. It's going to ask how long they've lived in Washington. It's going to ask about citizenship. Just a quick eligibility tips. I want to remind all students that a parent's citizenship status is not an eligibility requirement for the FOSFA. They are looking at the student who's applying and their citizenship status, not the parents. Gender designation also does not impact a student's eligibility for financial aid. These are both two components that I hear both of these things quite a bit from families. And so I know it's the two of the myths that are kind of coming out a little bit. And so I just want to make sure that it does not matter when it comes to parent citizenship or gender designation. I do see a question about what address would you put for a family that is experiencing homelessness or a youth that is experiencing homelessness. So if they do not have a mailing address, I know that some of the schools have allowed the students to use the school's mailing address to receive financial aid information. If not, the post office, they can request their mail be held at the post office and they can pick it up from there. Whatever option they use, I encourage them to update their address as I know that that's hard to do, but as their situations change, I'd have them update their address. But a lot of the schools have been allowing them to use the school address and then holding the mail. It's a little bit harder with COVID. So I know one of my students, they were having their mail sent to the school and then the school was doing it, delivering it with the lunch pickups. So they were dropping it off with the lunch pickups and meal deliveries. Does that answer your question, Ashley? I believe so. If not, let me know. Okay, perfect. Student education. This is when they're going to list what education they've completed, what are they going to be working towards, and it's going to ask about some work study stuff. This is important because I have students who think because they've graduated high school, they are now a graduate student. But when you put down graduate student on your degree for what you're working towards, then it can really make things more challenging. We want to make sure that they put their high school completion status as completed because they're going to complete high school. If not, they can give me a call. We will talk about that. And then the college degree or certificate they're going to work on, they're going to be working on their undergraduate degree. So that's a big one that I've seen that, hey, I'm a graduate. And this is about common definitions. So what's really critical in working with these students is that common definitions about financial aid, the definitions that we use may not be a common definition. So I always ask a student, what does this mean to you? Oh, well, and I asked like with the graduate degree, I graduated from high school, I am a graduate, so I'm a graduate student. That makes total sense. So we have to make sure students know what the common definition, this is what degree you'll be working towards, and this is the types of degrees that are available out there. And while yes, you just graduated and that is awesome, you're gonna be working on your undergraduate degree because they mean graduate as in graduate of a bachelorette degree. Oh, work study, real quickly. This is a big one. If they don't check yes for work study, some schools will not consider them for work study. I found this out last year. If they check I don't know, they may not be considered. So I tell students, check yes. What's the worst that happens? If you don't want to do work study, you decide in the fall that you don't want to work, you want to go to school, that's fine, you can decline the award. But if you don't say yes, and you say no or I don't know, you may not be considered by some institutions for work study. And I know some of you out there right now who are listening to this had work study jobs. I know I did too. They are amazing opportunities and we want to make sure students have access to those. And so sometimes just checking the wrong box can rob them of that opportunity. Also, the term work study is very confusing to students. They get like, it sounds like a bummer. Work and study, are you kidding me? Hard pass. They do not want to do that. But if we explain to them it is a working opportunity on campus typically and talk to them about what work study is, it seems to help them understand the definition and the opportunity that's available to them. Okay, next is selective service. This is the guidance and update I have on this. I'm not stoked on it. Okay, they want students to select their gender at birth. Now, I know in Washington State, we have 3 gender designations. It's awesome. And those designations change a birth certificate as well. They are talking about the designation at the birth of the child is what they want listed on here. If they were born male, they want them to select male and sign up for selective service. That was the guidance I received. I am still going to request more guidance to see if we can get a third gender designation, but it does not look like it'll be on this year's application. So I'm going to be upfront with everybody, working with students. We want to make sure that we are being very mindful when we are talking to students who do not identify as male or female, and then we're asking them to put themselves back in a box that they are working so hard to create their identity on. This can be very harmful for students. So we want to make sure when we're talking to students that we explain why. The reason why, it's a federal process. It takes time for them to change these things. They are working on it. But for right now, this is what they mean by this definition, and this is how we have to answer this question. And I'm not the answer I wanted to be able to give you guys today, but as the answer I have. And I know that it can be really hard for students. Nothing makes me sadder than not recognizing someone for who they are. And so this is a challenging one, and we will push for more change. Driver's license. Okay, so students get really excited about driver's license, and if they want to put their license in here, they can. If they have one, awesome, they can put it in here. I literally have had students wait to finish their application because they were so excited about their driver's license number that they needed to go home and get it and then put on the, and then all I could think is like, you drove here, why do you not have your license? But they'll want to enter it if they have it. If they don't, it says you can select that you don't have one. Oh, we have a question here. If a student has been successful in changing their birth certificate and Social Security to change their gender, would it match the gender currently on their records? Would they answer that question, what's on their records? Yes, I would have them answer, if their birth certificate's changed, their Social Security has changed, and that's what's legally showing on all their documents. I mean, the guidance they're telling me is whatever it was at birth, whatever the gender designation at birth was. I know that birth certificates have changed. I am still waiting for more follow-up on that one. I will make sure, Allison, I see your question on there. I will follow up with you just to verify with them. But right now they're saying whatever it was at birth. They are not looking at the birth records. So, and does another question is, does inputting their driver's license help avoid verification? It doesn't. I know we're trying to find any way to avoid that verification, and it doesn't impact verification. This is not one of the components that does. So this is just an additional component that they can enter in. Okay, now it's going to ask about if the student's ever been in foster care, as well as the education levels of the parents. This is going to trigger TRIO services, as well as other potential opportunities for funding and programs. And then in eligibility, it's just going to ask if they've received federal aid, if they have a drug conviction while receiving federal aid. It's just to see if they actually qualify for aid. There is a misconception out there that if a student has a felony, they won't receive federal aid. That is not true. I want to bust that myth as much as we can. If a student received financial aid while being convicted of a drug felony, and even then there are still some components to it, they may not be eligible for aid. It doesn't mean that they won't be, but I've heard people say, oh, if you have a felony, you won't get aid. That is not the case. We want students, especially those who have been incarcerated, to apply for aid. Now they're going to search for their high school, and they're going to confirm their high school. So they'll search and see, and then they're going to confirm it to make sure that they have the high school in the right state and all that stuff. I've had students pick the wrong high school because, surprise, there's a lot of capital high schools in a lot of states, things like that. So we want to make sure they verify it. This also helps us match their records in our database to make sure that the students that you're seeing, that they've completed their application or not in the portal. Okay. The fun part for students. Now they're going to search colleges. They can put 10 colleges on their application. So they don't have to know a federal school code. They can just search the schools. If they have more than 10 colleges, that's okay. Dream big. We say dream big. We mean dream big. So if they have more than 10, that's fine. They're going to put their top 10 on the application. They're going to wait 2 weeks. They're going to go ahead and reassess that list, and they're going to pull the ones that maybe they're less interested in. And then they're going to add in the ones that they hadn't put on their application before. When they select their school, it's going to ask them where they're living. Okay, this is going to be like where they think they're going to live. We know this may not be like a set in stone thing because on-campus housing may not be available, but we're going to have them pick what they think is going to be their plan for next year. They can also view college information by just going and clicking on the View College Info, and it'll give them information about the school itself, tuition, retention rates. This can be scary for some students, but it's important for them to understand, like, especially at the community colleges, they're going to see a lower retention rate because students will transfer before they graduate, but it's important for them to know the reality of like the costs and retention rates. Oh, I see another question. Would your college access care packages for incarcerated youth be relevant for young adults? Yes, I'd be happy to send college care packages or put together some for youth who have been out of high school for a couple of years. Anything to help re-engage students on their opportunities, especially if they've been in the workforce for a little bit out of high school, I'd be happy to put something together. Just email me. Okay, students, this is the marital status question. This one cracks me up. I know you guys have seen it too, but marital status. It'll say married, divorced, / widowed, or single. Students will think that single means I'm not dating anyone. And sometimes students are very excited about the fact that they're marrying or that they're dating someone, so much so that they don't want to put single on here. So I literally had a student last year who they put down married. And I said, oh, you're married. Okay, that's awesome. And the student goes, well, I'm not married right now, but this is for next year. And I think by next year I will be married. I said, okay. But you have to be married when you fill out this application. Oh, so it's not about future plans. I always tell students, this is not about your future. It's not a dating website, so there's not going to be a bunch of options. There's only these small amount of options. So it's wonderful that you're in a relationship, but unless you have put a ring on it and married it when you did your application, like before the application, it's not going to count on here. So I tell students, whatever it is right now, it's okay to put single. It doesn't mean that you're single. We're excited that you're in a committed relationship, but you're not married, therefore you're single. I had another student who was like, but if my girlfriend sees single, she's going to be mad. Don't worry. They just want to make sure they put whatever their status actually is as of today, not what their future plans are. We also have resources to help students. So this is the beginning of the dependency determination section. This is where it determines whether the student is dependent and requires parent information or independent and only requires their own financial information for this application. We have a lot of resources to help students understand dependency determination, as well as how to determine who their parent is and what information they will need to complete the application, all on our Financial Aid Advising Day website for 12th year campaign on our WASAC webpage. And so we have college and career one-pagers. This is for students. There's one for youth in care. There's one for LGBTQ youth. But we want to make sure that they're relevant one-pagers to help students in special circumstances navigate these processes. Okay, it's going to ask students if they have dependents, of course. We mean human dependents. So it says children on here. I literally had a girl use her cat as her dependent because, again, common definitions, you guys. I asked the student why she put her cat as a dependent. She said, that cat depends on me, and therefore it's my dependent because I pay for all of its food. Makes perfect sense to me. It really does. But they mean human dependence. So again, we have to work on common definitions with students so that they don't create their own definitions on it. Then it's going to ask additional dependency questions that might determine whether they are independent or not. And it's going to ask if they were at risk for homelessness and self-supporting, or if they were homeless after July 1st of this year. Okay, if they're independent, this is what's going to come up. It's going to say they're independent. They don't have to provide parent information, but it says if you want to, you can provide information, and it gives you some circumstances. I encourage students, they see this as a big barrier. They think they have to provide parent information. At this point, they don't. They can check no. That's why that question is there. So I always tell students, you can just check no. You do not have to provide parent information. You're independent. It's going to move you directly to the student tax filing section. Now, if the student is considered dependent, there's a couple things that are going to happen. It's going to ask you, or the student, if they have any special circumstances and if they can or can't provide parent information. If they can't provide parent information and they're considered dependent, it's going to say you can continue on in your application without your parent information. They're not going to transfer in any information. You're not going to get an EFC, and you're going to need to follow up with your financial aid office. This is really important for students that maybe don't meet the criteria for self-supporting and homeless, but you know that they're at risk for homelessness, or they're in a special circumstance, doesn't quite line up with everything, but you know that they're most likely independent. Maybe they haven't gotten a McKinney-Vento determination, things like that. We want to make sure they meet with their financial aid officer so they can determine the dependency and do a dependency override if eligible. So if they're in a special circumstance, they can still continue on and finish this application. Their next step, though, is to contact the financial aid offices of the schools that they're going to be applying to. So if the student is dependent, they will have to determine who their parent is. And so this is so complicated, there's a spreadsheet. So we have an infographic here that walks the student through situations. I let students determine this themselves. I typically provide this document to students. They can ask questions, but I try not to involve myself because this is a very private question we're asking. We're asking about your family status, and now we're going to have you determine which one is your parent, which can be very confusing for a student, especially in a 50-50 split household. So if the student is in a legal guardianship, maybe they're living with their parents, foster parents, or a sibling, we do not want any of those supports being provided in the financial information. When they say parent, they mean the biological parent. If they're married to each other, it's going to be both parents. If they're not married to each other, but they're living together, it's both parents. If they're divorced and not living together, it's going to be the parent they live with most and the step parent if they're remarried. So the whole golden rule is, where are they staying the most? Where they spend 51% or more of their time. So it's not about taxes, it's not about who's claiming who, but it's where they're living. Now, if it's a 50-50 split, even though there's 365 days in a year, and I know they're spending one night more than one place than another, we know that they need to determine who their parent is. If they can't determine by 50, they say it's 50-50 split, we can't determine that way. The next determiner is gonna be who makes more money, not more money, but who provides more support. So if they're providing more support than the other parent, that's the parent they're gonna go with. So we let them determine who is their parent, and then foster care parents would not be included in this. This would just be, so foster parents, legal guardian, if they're in a legal guardianship, they're independent, but legal guardians, they do not want income information from any of those. And then this graphic is right on our Financial Aid Advising Day page under our student support module about whose information you need for your financial aid application. I encourage you to email this to all your students who are completing the application. And this works as well for the WAFSA, like when they're determining who the parent's going to be, it's the same kind of rules for the WAFSA as well. So, and I will be preloading these onto our informational flash drives that are available on our Financial Aid Advising Day page as well that you can request. Okay, so parent marital status is the next one. It's going to ask about marital status, and it's going to ask the dates. This is always a hard one for students if they're working on this application on their own, because now they're going to be asking parent demographic information. And so some students may not have this if they don't have their parents with them. So this is when parents are probably going to be brought into the picture if they're not there already, especially if you're doing an event. Just real quickly on parent information, again, parents do not need to have social security numbers in order to have their student apply for financial aid. If a parent does not have a social security number, they're gonna use zeros in this section. So under parent social security number, if they don't have one, just enter zeros. They will not use their tax identification number. This is another one of the most common errors that I see. So they're gonna put zeros in, they're not gonna use their tax ID number. This is what happens next. You can see in the third box. Literally enter zeros, click next. It's going to say there's an error. Like oh, there's an error. That's okay. And it's going to wipe out the zeros in the box. Student is going to enter the zeros again and click next. It's going to say there's an error again. And the magical third time, they're going to enter zeros in again, and they're going to click next, and it's going to move them on to the next screen. So it's the rule of 3. It's going to take 3 times for them to resolve the error if they're using zeros for a social security number. This can be very confusing to parents because they think, oh, it's an error, I'm supposed to use my ITN number. Of course that's what you're going to think because that's what you use to pay taxes. So then parents will put in their ITIN number and then it comes back as an error. Like they can submit the application, but it comes back as an error. So they want to continue using the zeros and click next 3 times. I'm sorry that that's the process that goes on. I have emailed about it. but it should resolve the error. They should be able to move on to the next screen. This is good news. They updated the language on parent. So parent information used to automatically, if you picked mother for parent 1, it automatically labeled all the language for parent 2 as father. They've updated it. It just says parent 1, parent 2 now in every section. So before it was kind of parent 1, parent 2 in some sections, but then it said mother or father. Now it is just parent. Awesome. Quick question. How do we know if they put their social security number or itin number on the tax forms? So if they have a social security number, they're going to use their social security number for tax forms. If the person does not have a social security number and they're required to pay taxes, they're assigned a tax identification number. So undocumented families pay taxes, and they use that itin number to pay their taxes. And that's why it can be confusing, because it's the same amount of numbers as a social security number. So they want to make sure they're using zeros in the financial aid application, but they'll use their itin number when they're doing their tax forms. But for the financial aid application, we don't want them to use itin numbers at all. They want to make sure they're just using zeros. How do we know the difference? Students don't know the difference either. It doesn't matter on the difference. The social security, it'll say that it's an itin number on the tax form. So it'll say that it's an itin number, so they should know. And if it's not a social, if the parent does not have a social, they just put that. So it's basically them asking their parent if they have a social, and if they don't, they just put zeros in. Okay, parent household size. This is where they're going to determine how many students are in the household that the parents are supporting. Parent tax information. I think this is going to be a big one this year. I know last year there were families that didn't file because of the tax changes and that they were in an owing status and that they needed to wait to pay that. This year, we're going to have families that have deferred and gotten extensions on their taxes until like September, October area. Like, I know that it's coming up soon, but there will be extensions happening. And so you may have some families that are going to say they're filing in the future because they haven't filed yet. And that's fine. They just want to go ahead and select that they haven't filed 2019 taxes, but they're going to file. Then they click the OK box, or it won't let them continue on. Of course, if they haven't filed taxes, they won't be able to use the data retrieval tool because they haven't filed anything. But if they filed their taxes and they have a social security number and if they have their Fsa Id as a parent, they can transfer their taxes in. And we'll talk more about that very shortly. So the data retrieval tool we'll talk about, but if they don't use the data retrieval tool, they're going to enter all of their information in manually, which is fine because they can hover over the question mark and it tells them exactly which line from the tax form that they identified as theirs in the application. It's going to ask about how much parent 1 and parent 2 made. Schedule 1 question is now importable by the data retrieval tool. If a family has answered questions before about Schedule 1 that says they don't have Schedule 1 forms, it's not going to enable this question and they won't see it. So there's some skip logic going on in here. The amount for, income taxes. This is a big one. So if you're not importing from the data retrieval tool, I am finding that students will put down their income. They just read parents' income. They don't, for some reason, read the tax word for 2019, and they'll put their income here as well. And so what I find is then you'll have a student that has, like, the family made $63,000 last year, but now all of a sudden they paid $63,000 in taxes. What a rough year. I mean, that's the worst year ever. So we have to work with students to make sure that they reduce the amount of taxes to the correct amount. It's very common. And yes, Ashley, I agree. It is one of the worst questions. It's very challenging to explain to a student the different parts of a tax form. It's going to ask if they have any combat pay, tax credits, things like that. These will all be imported if they use the DRT, and if not, they can hover over again the question mark and it'll tell them where to find that line. See, it's going to ask about child support, cooperative work experience, taxable earnings, child support payments, untaxed unreported income. If they do the data retrieval tool, this will all automatically link in there. So the data retrieval tool is new in the last 5 years, maybe 6, no, 5 years. When someone transfers their information from the IRS directly into the FOSFA, all the data is masked. So they're going to have their W-2s or taxes to show which parent made how much income. So they still need their documents. By masked, I mean it just says imported from IRS. The address and name must be listed exactly as it is on taxes in order to log into the data retrieval tool. So if you accidentally or your accountant accidentally put in an address wrong on your taxes, it has to be whatever's listed on your taxes. If someone puts an extra space in front of the address, that character has to be there or will not link the two. So it has to be exactly as listed. If you wrote out Southwest instead of putting SW, you write out Southwest. You have to have an Fsa Id in order to use the data retrieval tool, and this tool reduces the chances of being selected for verification. Okay, so we have a question. The question is, what language do we use when parents say they're afraid of using their info when they're undocumented? And so this is one option that we provide to students. If a student is concerned about completing the FOSFA because of their family status or any reason, and they would prefer, they qualify for the FOSFA, but they prefer to just be considered for state aid and do the WAFSA, they're allowed to. So I've had students who have not felt comfortable reporting their family's information on the FOSFA, but have decided that they do feel comfortable with reporting it to the state application for state aid. They have to use it in state, but it has been an option for some students. And then, autofill. If you're using autofill during this application, autofill puts a space after every name, after every input, and that can also mess up the DRT importing. So make sure that if they're using autofill, that they're taking out any extra spaces. That, all the gray hairs in the world, you guys, came from that one last year. Is it safe for students to report on FAFSA with their parents? Okay, so is it safe for them to report this? Will other programs have access to this information? This is where I encourage students to look at the privacy statement and have a family conversation about the benefits and maybe challenges of aid. I always tell families this is a family decision. So we're not here to tell every student they have to apply, but if there are other options and they don't feel comfortable, they can always reach out to me. We can see what's available, but I want them to read the privacy statements on the FOSFA and the WAFSA so they understand. I hope that answers your question. Graduating from university in spring 2021, congratulations. Is there anything you have to do? No, if you're graduating this spring, you don't have to file this year. That's exciting. Yeah, your senior year, that's the last year you're like, oh, I don't have to file again. Okay, so parent assets. This is a new change. Depending on the parent simplified path determination, which is one of the questions that's earlier in the application, depending on how they answer it, they may be able to skip questions about parent assets. So we know that this one's really hard because families can get confused on it. They may determine that, like, I've had families accidentally include the place that they're renting as their real estate investment, or listing their small business with under 100 people. Or I've even had families feel uncomfortable with the amount that they have in their savings, and during an event actually put in an incorrect amount in what's currently in their cash checking and savings because they're a little embarrassed about it. So I always tell families that whatever you have, and that's okay, because this is to help provide funding to pay for school. So don't lie about what you have, just put whatever's in there, and that's the correct answer for you. But they may be able to say that they don't want to provide information about parents' assets, which might be kind of nice for some students that this doesn't really apply to them. It also brings up a lot of questions for families of, like, should I have investment properties? Should I have, and I always tell families, like, I've been doing this for a long time. And I don't know about you guys, but I have seen less and less college accounts, things like that, college savings plans, that families are really struggling to pay for school, and even having savings. And so when they see that, they think that they're supposed to have these things, and that's not the case. So once that is done, it's on to the student financial information. So if a student was independent, this is where it's going to automatically pop them into. If they're dependent, they will do all those parents' information. Now, at the end of the student financial information, the parents still need to come back and sign the application. So the parent's not completely done, but they're almost done. The student can also transfer their information from the IRS if they filed taxes and have a FSA ID to use that data retrieval tool. If not, they can manually enter in their information. And if they didn't file taxes, they can just select didn't file. It's going to ask them the same questions that it asked the parents about income. It's going to ask them about their student assets and how much they have. Now, this is where students get maybe a little confused. A lot of students, whatever their parents have, they have. You know, we're a family. So if mom and dad have $5,000 in their savings account, the student assumes I have $5,000 in my savings. And now the student double reports the income, that asset of the parent and the student. We want to make sure this is the student themselves. This is their money, not their parents' money that they'll be listing on here. Then they're going to save their application. It's going to ask if they're a preparer. Again, students crack me up because they're like, I prepared this. I am a preparer. That is an easy definition for them, but we always explain to them, a preparer, it says it's rare, is someone who gets paid to do this. And so I always tell students, you're not a preparer, but you did prepare this. What determines whether a student has the option to skip parent asset questions? There's a couple different things in there in that section. I don't have them listed right now of what they have to answer, but I believe it's an income threshold is going to be the determiner on that. And then the next question is, my 4th year university, I'm still applying for my major and going for another 3 years. So you want to make sure you apply for financial aid every year that you're going to be in school, because you can change your degree sometimes and still get funding as you go towards your ultimate goal. So any year that you're going to be in school, no matter what, always apply for financial aid. What's the worst that happens? They tell you no, but if you don't do it, you've told yourself no. So I always tell students, any year that you're going to school, always apply, even grad school. Okay, here's your FAFSA summary, super easy. You know that I put it all on one page so you can see how long it is. I want you to get a feel of what it looks like if you do it on paper. This is the summary. This is the last chance for the student to be able to identify any errors and fix them before they submit the application. So that it gives it in a different format so they can reread it. I encourage students to stop and really read through all of this and make sure it's all correct and accurate before submitting it, because correcting takes longer than submitting. Then they're going to sign. So the signature page, they're going to use, the student will use their FSA ID, and then the parent can use either an FSA ID or they can do a paper signature. They have to read through this. This talks about just kind of the requirements of aid and kind of the rules of aid. They're going to select agree and then click next. Then they're going to sign the application. We have supports, including a student support module, our workbook, and college knowledge that helps with the signature process. We know that this can be challenging. They're going to sign the FOSFA, and then the parent signature is going to be the one that can be challenging. So they identify which parent's going to sign it. So they pick parent 1 or parent 2, if applicable. The parent's going to agree to the terms and conditions. And then they have either the FSA ID that they're going to sign with, or it's going to say, here are your options to sign and submit. You can sign with, and this is nice because it gives it to you all in one spot. You can sign with your FSA ID, you can sign with a signature page, or you can submit without signatures. What I love about this is that it tells you very easily which one, like all your options. And in the past, I think it's been hard because it's an extra button that you have to hit to even see if there's an option. So this makes it a little more clear. We're getting there with the signature pages. The signature page is going to be something that they have to print and sign and send in. Things we want to be mindful of is students' access to technology may be there, but students' access to printers may not be. They may need support from counselors to print these things and provide them to them. So I've had counselors who will print and then, or the student will send them the document, the council will print it and send it back to the student will have the parent sign it and then send it to federal student aid. If the student submits without signatures, they can, but they have to go back in and provide signatures, or again, that 45-day rule applies. It will not be a completed application, they'll be missing signatures. Whatever way they sign the application, it's important to do it promptly. So if they're doing a signature page, I encourage them to try to send it within the next day or two after completing the application. On the signature page, when they print it, the address that's listed on the signature page, that is the address, and you'll see here in a second, as you go in and sign the signature page itself, you have to send it to the address, specifically the PO box listed on the form. Each year has its own PO box. Last year, the PO box on the form was different than the PO box listed on the website. When I called them, they said they have to send them to the PO box listed on the form. So they want to make sure that when they're sending it, they mail it to the address listed on the form, not on the website. Now, Ashley reminded me, thank you, Ashley. Ashley likes to provide a stamp and an envelope, and she prints the form and sends it to the student as well. The stamp can be a barrier. Yes, it can. So when I go out to the schools, those of you who I've worked with in person, you know I bring my big old book of fun stamps out so they can choose between like Harry Potter and Superman or whatever they want. And we even work with students on how to address that envelope. But at events in the past, I have provided pre-printed envelopes so that the student doesn't have to figure out how to address an envelope right away, especially at an event. It's just one of those things that can be a barrier. But the stamp itself, yes, can definitely be a barrier. Submit, it says, it's okay to submit without signatures. It has to be within 45 days. From what I saw last year, yeah, within 45 days, if they did not have that in it, it just basically was an application that was not completed then. It transitioned back to an application that was incomplete. So this is the challenge with the signature page. I've had students send it multiple times, and I know out there in Zoom land, you guys have had the same problems because I've gotten phone calls and we've commiserated over how hard it is to send multiple signature pages. If your student is struggling with a signature page, they send it the first time. If they send it the first time and they don't receive it, federal student aid, I encourage the student to send it again and send it certified mail so they get verification that it was received. The best way to check for a student to see if they have processed their paper signature is if you have access to the portal, your missing signature will convert into a completed application once the signature has been processed by federal student aid. So if you have access to the student portal, then that will help you determine. If not, the student can log back into their application and it'll tell them that they're missing signatures. If a student participates in Running Start, does this affect the number of years they can apply for financial aid? And what should we be communicating to Running Start students? Great question. Any of the dual credit programs, they want to make sure that they check with their financial aid office. If they are taking, so financial aid will only cover so many credits towards a degree, but if a student takes a bunch of classes that that doesn't meet a graduation requirement, that can be challenging. So I've had Running Start students who take stuff that go towards their degree, and I've had students who will take a lot of fun classes, thinking of very specific students in the past. For this, we want them to talk to their financial aid or to their Running Start advisor at the community college about how the classes they're taking are impacting their ability for aid, so their eligibility for aid. They always want to check and make sure. They want to look at their educational plan and see how their credits are aligning with their graduation, like to make sure that they're going towards their degree, as well as their major at a university. And at the same time, making sure that what they're taking is not going to impact their ability to take more classes in the future. The time I find that it can be challenged for Running Start students is if they're going into the nursing, like a nursing program or a competitive ranked program, where let's say they got a B+ in anatomy, A&P, anatomy physiology. If that's the case and they need to retake it because they actually need an A, financial aid, once you hit a certain grade, sometimes typically they will not pay for that class to retake it just to increase your grade. And then you can be in an owing status where you have to pay for that class. Another question that just came up is, are you finding that there are issues with students requesting their non-filing letter via the phone if they're having issues requesting it online? Okay, so Non-filing letters. If a student's selected for verification, they're going to have to provide some documentation. And so that documentation can include a letter of non-filing from the IRS. So this is really impacting the most is our independent students. Dependent students who are selected for verification do not have to provide a letter of non-filing for themselves, but if their parent didn't file taxes, then they will have to provide a letter of non-filing for their parent. With the IRS offices closed, and a lot of them are, they have struggled with providing those, and they even put up on their website, we're not processing paper requests. They've removed that now, so I know that they're starting to process them, but we did find challenges this summer. Yolanda, I would say like half my gray hairs from this summer had to do with letters of non-filing. And so it has been an issue. I tell students, just if you are stuck in the process and you can't get those documents, to be in contact with your financial aid office. Talk to your financial aid office, tell them, I've tried to request it this way, I've tried to request it this way, what can I do to show a good faith effort that I'm trying to get these documents so that they can make a determination at the school. But yes, when IRS offices closed for COVID, it's been very challenging to get those documents. Okay, then they submit their application and here's the confirmation page. It tells them what's gonna happen next, who to contact if they have questions, but most importantly, at the bottom it says, does your brother or sister need to complete a FOSFA, which is awesome. If they click on that, it'll import their information to the other student's application, not the student's information, but the parent's information, which makes it so much easier for our parents, especially parents who have multiple children the same age, twins and triplets. Oh, having to enter that 3 times, not fun. Being able to enter it in once, so much more doable for a parent. And then the next thing you'll see is the process information. It'll tell them the school's graduation rate, transfer rate, retention rate, information about their financial aid application, their EFC. They will not receive this student aid report if they did not submit their financial information and are waiting to talk to a financial aid office for a dependency override. One of the questions is, I always suggest students take a screenshot of this page. Is there any reason I shouldn't do that? I mean, they're going to get a copy sent to their, for the completion page, they're going to get information sent to them. But I always tell students, if you want to take a screenshot so you know what when it was processed and things like that, it's nice to have and to remember. If not, I always have them write it down in their workbook when it was submitted. But we know students like to take photos more. Okay, and then if they want to make corrections, then they're just going to use the same page. They'll log in and they'll go ahead and click on the second tab that says Make Corrections. Surprise, surprise, the correction page is the same as it was last year. So it looks like the financial aid application, the FAFSA from like 4 years ago. They did not change it. It's going to stay the same. So when a student goes to corrections, it's going to look different. And I've had students concerned that this is like, they think it's a scam website because it looks so different from the regular FAFSA. It's the correct application that they're in. And they just want to make sure they start the correction, but it's always going to look like this, it seems like, and it is the right page. Okay, the demo site. I know you guys want to play around in this. It's so much fun to see what each slide looks like, and you will be able to play around in the 2021-2022 FOSFA starting September 27th. The FOSFA demo site is where you can log in and pretend that you're different types of students, whether you're a renewal student, a new student, independent, dependent, and it preloads the application. You can play in it and you can't break it. So that you can get screenshots if you need it, but you can also walk through the application yourself, and it is a great way to know how to do it, is just to do it yourself once or twice without having to do your own application. And then another resource for you is our 12th year campaign site. So this is a brand new web page at our wasac.wa.gov page. Sam, if you can put the link into our chat box, you guys can go ahead and check it out. And it's to help you with Financial Advising Day and all of our new resources. Okay, any questions about the FOSFA before we move on to the WAFSA? And I see some questions coming in. I apologize. I was supposed to get bifocals. I told the eye doctor I'm not ready for bifocals, and I am obviously ready for bifocals. Okay, do you have any suggestions on how we can support our students completing their FOSFA WAFSA remotely? We're so used to helping our parents and families in person, where they can view their tax income returns. So yes, here are the tips I have. For 12th year campaign this year, we're hosting financial aid virtual events. where we will have a virtual financial aid night and daytime events too. We have 7 of them, where students can sign up to get assistance. It's going to be through Zoom. They sign in. We're having schools co-sponsor with us. So if you're from a high school and you want to co-sponsor an event where you know your students are going to come to that specific one, we'll even create a breakout room for you in the Zoom room. So you'll have your own breakout room for your students. We're going to do a lot of remote work this year, mostly remote work, at least for the first part of the year. Like, I'm going to still be hopeful for after fall, but for fall, we're going to be remote for FAFSA WAFSA. These are the ways we can help you, is doing the financial aid events. I'm doing classroom visits. So if you want to come talk to your students, I'm happy to do that too. And then I've been doing FAFSA WAFSA one-on-ones. So if a family is really struggling with the process or they have errors, I actually have been doing one-on-one application appointments with them. We just sit down with the family and kind of walk through the application and help them in the sticking spots. And so they can make appointments with us, and they can do that. The link is right on our 12th year page as well. We have physical resources as well, digital resources. The physical resources, you can still distribute, especially with lunch pickups. So if you have families that are struggling with technology, I have flash drives, not a lot of them, but I have some flash drives that have loaded with student information that we can send to students who can't attend not in person, but a digital event if they don't have computer access, and then we can do a phone appointment. So there's a lot of options that we're working towards. All appointments will be done virtually. I absolutely love this program. It's to serve all students, but specifically students who are first generation low income families. The reality is this virus, that COVID-19 is hitting these families at a higher rate that I am serving. And I can't have an event where we expose families to this virus, especially if they don't have equitable access to healthcare. I want to super spread like financial aid information, but maybe not COVID. So we're going to do things virtually this fall. And then we're going to, hopefully, I'm crossing my fingers because you guys know I miss you and I miss coming out to your schools, that I'm hoping that we will have some access later in the year to being able to come back out. Any other questions for the FAFSA? Okay, I'm not seeing any. I'm going to get the WAFSA presentation up. Okay, so let me get... It's my first day back on dual monitors, and you would think I never had them in the first place. Okay. Here we go. I will definitely be sharing this PowerPoint presentation. Oh, you guys are so sweet. I will happily share this PowerPoint presentation, and then we will also have a very small financial aid night presentation that you can use with your students. And then there are like 11 very small videos in that student support module section too. So if you have a student struggling in a specific part about financial aid, you can actually send those to them. The students have told me they do not need an hour and a half of financial aid. Apparently they're not as excited about it as I am. And so they want little snippets. So we made all of our videos into what I call like amuse-bouche videos, very small sample taste of financial aid versus the whole meal. Okay, can everybody see the WAFSA line by line now? I'm hoping so. Okay, perfect. Okay, let's talk about the WAFSA. So now that we did the FAFSA, this is going to be a little bit shorter because all the questions are typically the same, but I want you to see the application. So we're going to talk about the WAFSA overview, filing after the WAFSA, and how to support students in this. So we're using Dreamers as an umbrella term in this presentation. I just want to let you know, because not every student identifies with the term Dreamers. So I always ask students what they prefer. But when we say Dreamers, I mean non-citizens who meet House Bill 1079 requirements, non-citizens with DACA status, whether it's expired or not, and then students who are non-citizens who don't meet these state requirements. So we want to serve all of our Washingtonians and make sure they have access. And we're really fortunate in our state to have programs that do that. So just general tips when working with the WAFSA. Your job's to assist, not to prepare the WAFSA for someone else. And that's the same with the FOSFA. We're not here to do the application for the student because we want them to be able to do this year after year, but we're here to support them in this process and assist them with it. Especially, you want to make sure you're mindful of sensitive information. If you're in person doing these applications, we don't want students to have to identify their status in the financial aid process. So we always want to be mindful about the language you use, and that this is for state financial aid eligibility, not federal. This is just state. So here's the application and where they're going to start. It's digital, just like the FOSFA. They're going to sign in now. We're updating our screens right now for WAFSA. So you're going to see last year's screens, and then I'm going to update them. So the class of 2021, they're going to use the 21-22 application for WAFSA. They're going to use their 2019 tax information, same as the FOSFA. If they don't know if they should do the WAFSA or the FOSFA, this is a great chance for them to determine it by going to start a new WAFSA, and it's going to do some citizenship status questions to determine if they should do the FOSFA or the WAFSA. So if a student doesn't know, I always tell students, don't make an assumption, go to the website and determine for yourself which application you should do. And that's also one of the modules we have for student support for Financial Advising Day. So it's going to ask them about if they have a social security number, if they will have certain requirements before they graduate, and then it'll tell them whether they're WAFSA eligible or not. So for this case, the student's WAFSA eligible. The next thing is going to ask, did you complete a financial aid application already? Did you already do the FOSFA? Because there are students who think, if I do the FOSFA, I get this much money, and if I do the WAFSA, I get double the amount, and that's not the case. They just have to do the correct application for them. So we asked them again, just to make sure, because I'm frugal, and I would have answered that too, like, oh, okay. And if they say yes, it says, oh, you already completed a FOSFA, don't worry, you won't be able to complete a WAFSA because you already have an application in. There's going to be instructions as well as information about privacy. So this is a great spot for students to read, pause, make sure that number one, they have all the information that they need, as well as number two, that they understand how their information is being used. Then they're going to create their account. So this is kind of like them creating an Fsa Id. They're going to use an email address that they typically not their high school email address, something that they're going to have access to after they graduate. They're going to create their own password. And then so the secret questions are going to be kind of their challenge questions. And basic general information. If they've already done a WAFSA in the past, or maybe they created an account before, then they can put their WAFSA ID in there. But if they don't know it, it's okay. And then they're going to register. And then making sure I understood your answer from the last question. If a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident does not want to share their parent info due to their parents being undocumented, or any reason in all honesty, they can apply for the WAFSA instead. Yes. So I had students this year whose parents did not feel comfortable completing a federal application of FOSFA, and it actually was going to keep the student from going to college because they weren't going to have access to aid. And after a conversation about WAFSA and other options, the student determined that they wanted with their family to do the WAFSA instead. And so they just decided to do state aid, which worked out perfectly for them because they were staying in state. So yeah, they always have that option. Not a lot of students are using it, but it's there for those who need it. Okay, so home screen information. This just kind of walks them through the steps of the WAFSA. So they're going to start it, they're going to pick their schools, and they're going to sign it. So they're going to put all their information in. It gives them little graphics on where they are in the application, whether they've started it, whether they've just looked at it, if they've signed their application. The other piece is inviting a parent on the application, which we'll talk more about shortly. Okay, this information for student demographics is going to automatically import from the account they created. So once they create that account, it automatically preloads some of this information for them. It's going to ask for their driver's license as well. Again, not required. If they don't have one, they just select no license. If they have a social security number, DACA, or ITIN number, they can enter it in here too. It helps match records. Permanent mailing address, again, with permanent mailing address, if they don't have one, I encourage them to see if they can use the school's mailing address or the local post office. Next is student marital status. The same things apply as before. And then this can be confusing for students, but this is when they're going to enter in the student's household of family members and number of students in college. So this is for the student's household themselves. So this is the student and whoever they support. So whoever their dependents are. So when they provide their household, it's going to be themselves and their dependents, not their parents or anything like that. So typically this is just going to be the student themselves and then the student being in college for this application. It's going to ask for some residency information as well as high school information. This helps us with matching applications and determining that they are eligible for funding. Then it's going to ask about their education plans. Again, same thing about undergraduate and graduate degrees, making sure that they select the correct grade level when they're going to college. It makes it a lot easier. And then state work study as well. Here are all the dependency determination questions. Now, when they answer a question no, it opens up the next question. So this thing goes on, those of you who've done this application, you know it goes on for like 3 pages worth almost. And the students are like, why does it keep expanding? And I always like to give the students the why behind things. When they ask me what the why is, we want to make sure that they know. The reason why that is so that students read through each question. There are so many circumstances out there that could make a student independent. And I want to make sure that if they are considered independent, that they go through this to be accurately assessed, because if a student's independent but ends up answering a question incorrectly and has to provide dependency information, it can put a student in a real challenging situation. I've had students who have answered questions incorrectly because they went through this too quickly, and then it says you need parent information. I had one student that almost broke a no contact order because they thought they had to have that information. We want to make sure that if a special circumstance is there, that we try our best to make sure that the student is assessed accurately by doing this, or if they don't meet any of these criteria, that they're talking to their financial aid office. Even more dependency information. And students ask is like, so really every single one is, these are all, every question that's on here is because there are students who meet these criteria. Then they're going to submit their application. So for this part, if the application, if they can provide parent information, it's just gonna be like the FOSFA, they're gonna continue on. If not, if they can't due to special circumstance, and what I like about this is it tells you what a special circumstance is and what a special circumstance is not. Then they determine if they cannot provide parent information, they're gonna contact their financial aid office, they're gonna continue on and submit their own data and their school list and not their parent data. So then it's gonna ask, so this is a little different. This is where the difference is in the application. After educational plans, typically it's going to go to parent information for taxes, not student. So it's kind of reversed. So then it goes directly to the student tax information. It's going to be just like in the FOSFA. Oh, quick question. How about parents who live back in the native country or paid under the table? Okay, so for parents that live in a native country, if they are not considered independent, if they're considered dependent, they're not considered like McKinney-Vento, any determinations like that, they've had to get like information from the native country. They basically have to use their taxes and then they do a currency converter to US dollars. And if they're paid under the table, there's a section in the information listed that covers income that's not that has been received in other ways, so they can actually list it in there as well. But yeah, I know I've had students who have to contact their families, and hopefully they have access to the technology to be able to provide, especially if they get picked for verification. And this year, just like last year, but this year we will have verification appointments. If you have students who are struggling with the verification process because of special circumstances like this, we will have one-on-one appointments and we will walk them through that process. So we will take care of them, don't worry. So student income, there's no data retrieval tool for this. All income information in the WFSA must be manually entered. It's going to ask about child support, and it's going to ask all the questions that ask the parent. So like pension payments, things like that. And then it's going to move on to the parent information if required. So it's going to ask about parent's household. If the parent does not have a social security number, they're going to enter zeros in here. It's going to ask for a parent's email address. This is a real critical one because the parent's primary email address is how they're going to send a signature request. So the parent's email address needs to be different than the student email address. But you want to make sure whatever it is they're using is accurate because they're going to get an email to this address to help the parent sign the application. Parent tax information that they're going to enter in. Same as the FOSFA, it's going to ask about your assets, your savings, investments, all of it. Same questions as in the FAFSA. It's going to ask parents about if they're paying child support, if they're receiving any other veterans benefits. Untaxed income would be where they enter in income that's earned under the table, under a alternative payment, it says on there. And then you can pick the schools. So the schools are the last part in the WFSA instead of the middle part. So they pick their colleges. For this, they can pick up to 10, just like with the FOSFA, and they want to pick where they're living, if they're going to be living on campus, off campus, or with family. This is their plan as of right now. We don't know what's, we don't know what 2021 has to hold. So I tell students, whatever your plan is at this point, you're going to enter in there. And if it changes, you can always talk to the financial aid office, no problem. Then this is the disclosures that talks about required disclosures, what software you need to be able to sign the application. So it has all of the criteria required. And then the student's going to sign the application by putting their name, the password they provided, the current city and state that they're in, and that's going to be their signature. Then they're going to invite the parent by clicking on the person plus sign to sign their application. So the parent will get invited, they'll get an email that says, hey, you've been requested to sign an application for Washington State Financial Aid. The parent will complete that process, and that's how that part gets signed. And once it's signed, then it'll have, it'll be completed, and the student will be able to see a summary of it. In fact, if they don't look at that summary, they can't move on to the next screen. So watch the follow-up. Have the parents digitally sign it and submit it if applicable, if the parent is required. If the student wants to update their colleges, they can. Same with if they have more than 10 colleges, that's fine, dream big, but pare down. Scholarships, they want to make sure that they start applying for scholarships, all students, no matter what part of the financial aid process they're in. Scholarships, especially this year, I don't know about you guys, but last year I found several scholarships that were unawarded because people weren't applying. Applying for scholarships is so critical. They can start at the washboard and they can create an account, and it matches them to what they are qualified for and tells them which scholarships they meet the criteria for. So that's a great way to start, and those are vetted scholarships. Colleges are going to send out their acceptance letters and financial aid award letters, so they might need some help assessing their award letters. Students need to respond to any request for information from their colleges as quickly as possible. We know that that can hold up their application, and for some students it even has met the difference between them going to college and not going to college because they didn't get documentation in a timely fashion. Best practices, providing translated materials. Our 12th year campaign materials, we have postcards that tell you you can't get financial aid if you don't apply, and on the back it tells you every item that you need to complete a financial aid application and where you can get assistance. Those come in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, Somali, and Russian. We also have college knowledge books. They are physical copies printed in English and Spanish, but we have them digitally in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, Somali, and Russian as well. Financial aid nights. Instead of using a FAFSA night, which I know has a cute little ring to it, and we've used it for so long that it's hard to change that, using the term financial aid night. And this is why. Every year I get phone calls from students, usually around May, saying, when was WFSA night? I know there was a FAFSA night, but I'm doing the Fafsa. When we say FAFSA night, it excludes those families that are doing the Fafsa. So we just say financial aid night. Also, then families aren't identifying which application they're doing, i.e. identifying their status. Partner with caregivers. I know Futures Northwest is doing an amazing job with this. We have a partnership that we're doing videos as well as resources for parents so that they have access to information. They can be the knowledge keepers of that information as well. So I encourage you to check out the Futures Northwest website for the caregiver series that they have. And then finding those trusted sources on college campuses so you can have a direct contact to someone who can support that student at that college campus. So having a single point of contact, and then sharing resources. United We Dream. The Beyond 1079 conference is wonderful. I don't know if it'll happen this year because it's usually in person, but they provide typically a scholarship list that's 45 pages of scholarships that are available for undocumented students. So I really encourage pushing out that information, especially that conference if it goes virtual, because it's such an amazing conference. It's not just about how to pay for school, but it's about really supporting students who are undocumented in our state as they go to their next chapter of finding the career that they love. So I encourage you that conference is so empowering and amazing. I hope that it's in person, but since it's in October, I highly doubt it this year. But I encourage you to connect your students to it. Okay, our districts are tracking financial completion rates. We'll soon be able to see WAFSA completion rates. Unfortunately, no, not right now. We have to have a certain number of applicants so that they're not identifiable at a school for us to release numbers. So it's going to take some time before we can release any of those WAFSA completions. I wish I could, you know, I don't even have access to it myself. Sorry, Renee. Other questions about life, liberty, and the pursuit of higher education, financial aid applications? I am so excited for fall. I know this is really dorky. Those of you who know me know I'm a dork about financial aid, but I am very excited for fall and for the opportunities this year. I'm going to go ahead and any questions? Give you guys a second to type your questions in.